Welcome to the Athletic NBA Daily. On today's show, we are talking Atlanta Hawks. Lots of expectations for the Hawks. And with me is my friend Lauren Williams, who writes for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about the Atlanta Hawks. It's great to have you. We had Lauren on many times last season. She's been on Slam and Jam, a great writer, a great podcast guest. We're glad to have you on again.
Thank you so much for having me. As I said, it's always great to talk Hawks, and yeah, the expectations are very much different this year.
Yeah, and some of that goes with the things they did this summer to add to the team. In your mind, what's the most impactful change that the Hawks made this summer?
I think it would have to start with, and this is, no disrespect to Landry Fields. I know he was at the beginning of his career as a general manager, but it's clear that the Hawks just needed somebody with a little bit more experience behind that, and moving on from him, bringing in Onsi Saleh, or promoting Onsi Saleh to the general manager role. I think that just kind of kickstarted a lot of, the change in direction. He acquired Kristaps Porzingis for, what feels like pennies on the dollar, just because the expectations are a little bit higher, but the reward is pretty much higher than the risk that it did to acquire him, just because he's only on contract for one season. If they want to re-sign him, they can. I mean, he's playing for another contract with the Hawks, but they're not locked into that. And then obviously bringing on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Kennard, those are just huge moves just to add some depth to this team, and not only just depth, but a lot more experience than this Hawks team has had in the last couple of seasons. So, yeah, I think the promotion of Onsi Saleh is probably just like the biggest move that the Hawks did this offseason.
Yeah, this feels like the most depth and the most Trae Young team that we've seen. And so, I mean, it feels like a year where you get to really evaluate what Trae is capable of, because you have perimeter defense out the wazoo. You have floor spacers from the big position. You have a guy that can even roll to the basket some, and Okongwu, who I think has taken some steps forward. So I just think like this is the year where it's like, hey, what do we actually have with Trae Young as the leader of this team? And if this doesn't work, then it's maybe time to figure out what's next. Do you feel the same way?
I absolutely do. Trae Young is entering his 8th year in the league. The Hawks have tried a few different iterations of teams around him. And it's like the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over, or different things over and over, and expecting the same result or a different result or whatever it is. And so the common denominator in that would be Trae, if you're moving so many different pieces around him. And with this being such a big year for him in terms of what does the future look like for him contract wise. He's got a player option in the 2026-27 season. The Hawks have looked at options as far as, a potential trade partner with Trae, and from all that we've heard, it doesn't seem like there are that many buyers out there for him. And so he's got to play for his contract this season if he wants to stay in Atlanta. So I think that's a huge incentive for him with a team that's got higher expectations. They're going to go out and compete, because you don't go out and get a guy like Kristaps Porzingis and not have the expectation that this team is going to compete. You don't go out and get a guy like Luke Kennard, who's been in the postseason, 3 of the last 4 years, and not expect there to be a team that's going to compete. Same with Nickeil Alexander-Walker going to the Western Conference Finals last season with the Minnesota Timberwolves. You have to have the expectation that this team is going to compete. And so that's something that Trae Young has said that he's wanted to do. And so you have these pieces now, and now it's time for him to actually go out and make it work with them.
Yeah. An interesting storyline that is kind of ongoing with this team, and it started last year with acquiring Dyson Daniels before the season. He's up for a contract extension, and he had an awesome year. And they recently traded Kobe Buffkin, which shout out to the Buffkin boys. I was a big believer in Kobe Buffkin at the draft. They traded him just for cash. They're like, hey, take Kobe Buffkin off our hands. I think some of that was get his salary off of our books so that we can extend, because it would be really silly not to extend Dyson Daniels. But I don't know what the number is that makes sense for him.
I couldn't tell you myself either. I would think what you would want. I think Jalen Johnson's in the 16 million range, 15 million range. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Onyeka Okongwu is in like that similar range. So you would anticipate that with him having a season award, that maybe that elevates him a little bit to stay in that similar range, only because his offensive tool set is still kind of a question mark, So I do think that if they can kind of get him in that area, then I think that would be a pretty solid deal for him. You don't want to overextend yourself with him too much just because you just don't know what he is offensively. I think we are pretty confident in who he is defensively. And that's not to say that that's not something that you put a value on, but with the way that this team plays, with what Quinn Snyder wants this team to do, he's going to have to find some more things in his offensive tool bag in order to justify the Hawks kind of really rolling out the armored trucks for him, if you will. So I think the big thing is that he's going to have a lot more responsibility this year. I know a lot of people had slotted in Kobe Buffkin as sort of the backup point guard, but if you look at the way that the team is constructed, there is no traditional backup point guard on this team. It's always, I think, going to be a backup point guard by committee, if you will, of Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dyson Daniels, Luke Kennard, and in my opinion, underratedly, Zaccharie Risacher. I don't think we've totally seen Zach's ability as a playmaker yet, just because of how young he is. But I think with the added expectation that Dyson is going to take on some of that role as one of the secondary playmakers on this roster, especially when Trae goes to the bench, that should help, his case for getting a little bit more money, I think.
Yeah. Jalen Johnson's making $30 million. So he's getting,
thank you.
he got the 5 for 150 deal.
I knew it was a multi-year, I knew it was 5 something. I don't know where I was putting the 5, so.
Nickeil got the 15 million.
Thank you. There we go.
Is probably what you were thinking. And
yes.
It's tough. I think that because he's super young, there's a lot of improvement to be had.
He's only 22, 23.
It's wild. But he can command a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He could command a whole lot. And so I just wonder, is he going to get something close to that 5 for 150? Is he going to get something closer to what Josh Giddey got out there, the 4 for 100? I don't know what to pay him. He's extremely valuable, especially if you are moving forward with Trae Young. Part of this makes me think okay, maybe you do wait until restricted free agency with a guy like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one.
It is a tricky one, but I also think there is a little bit of value in waiting and seeing, especially maybe to get a sense of what the rest of the NBA kind of values Dyson Daniels at, and maybe that can help inform, the direction that this team. Obviously, you don't want your hand to be twisted or your wrist to be twisted or whatever it is, but I don't know. The Hawks have had a history of going out and overpaying guys too fast, too soon. And over the last couple of seasons, they've kind of steered clear of that. Mm-hmm. And so I think, Johnson had his prove it year for the most part in 2023, 24 season. And then so I don't think there's any harm in them, maybe keeping the discussion lines open throughout the season and then, making the offer then afterward.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of decisions that are coming up, and I like the construction of this team, but things could change pretty rapidly because Porzingis is on his last deal that you mentioned. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. Trae Young needs a contract extension as well. And so as much as some people really like the iteration of this roster, maybe it does stay together. Maybe it works perfectly and this team wins 50 games and they get to the conference finals again. That would be great. but there is also another world where things unravel just because of the contract situations that they have in front of them.
For sure. And I think too, they're of course very much concerned with building not a team that's just kind of competing for, a conference finals, a finals position this season, but they're very much adamant wanting to build a team that's going to be competing in that realm for multiple years. And so with them, acquiring, a couple more picks, maybe that also helps to inform their decision of what they want to pay somebody like Dyson Daniels, especially if, in this upcoming draft class, you can find somebody that can provide a similar skill set for cheaper.
Yeah, that's totally possible. Number one pick, Zaccharie Risacher.
Mm-hmm.
He had an interesting Eurobasket, I would say. I think he's great for this particular Hawks team because he's wired to be unselfish in so many ways. He's a guy that loves to play off of other guys.
Yep.
His unselfishness, I think, is a great thing for him in the NBA. I think it kind of hurt maybe the perception of him in Eurobasket a little bit. But what are the expectations for this guy? I think that, looking back, it was certainly a question. It was a weird draft year. It was a weird year to have the number one pick. No one really knew who was supposed to be the number one pick. I look back at it and I think, the Hawks did a good job.
I agree.
This is a big wing that can shoot it. He fits into the way that they want to play. I think that he has a chance to take a step this year. What are the expectations for Risacher heading into this season?
I mean, I think the big thing is that he does take a step in this upcoming year. I think he continues to, be a consistent shooter. We saw that sort of come alive toward the end of the season. He was shooting, close to 40%, if not 40% in the latter half of the year. And once he kind of got over the, habit that I think a lot of rookies do with questioning some of their shot selection or the hesitation. He looked a lot more confident knocking shots down. And so I think the expectation is that he continues to build on that. And I kind of touched on it a little bit already, is just his ability to be somebody that could be a playmaker, especially, alongside a guy like Jalen Johnson who pushes the pace. Zach has the ability to make things happen in the half court. I think that's an underrated part of his game. And then also he's playing off of KP now, who does have the ability to make younger guys around him better. We saw it when he went to DC with the Wizards, and he was helping guys like who was on that team when he first came to DC. I know, why am I blanking on that team? Kuzma was on that team, and Kuzma looked really good that season. Who else was there?
This is a very forgettable Wizards team. I mean, Beal was obviously there. Avdia was there,
and he had the ability to make those guys around him look better. Even though, again, yes, you're right. I couldn't remember who was on that team, but I just remember that Wizards team giving the Hawks problems just because of Porzingis' ability to stretch the floor. And then obviously being around other guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, again, Luke Kennard, all have postseason experience and can pour into some of those young guys. But I definitely think the bar is raised for Zach to really take another step forward, and especially on the defensive end. I think that was what a lot of people had questions about, was whether he could be an impact player on the defensive end. And his off-ball work, I think, was pretty solid for a 19-year-old. So you expect that he's going to continue improving on that side of the ball as well. But I think, him continuing to play with pace, continuing to find ways to make plays on the offensive end, I think that's kind of what this team wants him to do, while still being unselfish, of course.
Yeah, I think that he has probably been forgotten in some ways, just because you think about Jalen Johnson, you think about Trae Young, the Porzingis edition, even Nickeil is somebody that people think a lot about. But they have this 6'8" wing that can do a little bit of everything, developing in the background a little bit. I think and that's probably even good for him that he's not,
Agreed.
out front and center. So I think that he's going to have a really nice second year. I look forward to watching him.
Oh, for sure. And I think too, I know a lot of not pressure necessarily, but like the expectation is that having Kristaps Porzingis in the lineup is going to open up the floor for a lot of guys. Obviously, Jalen Johnson, who, likes to attack the basket. But also it's going to help guys like Dyson Daniels and Zaccharie Risacher, who have the ability to cut to the basket. And that's a huge part of their games. And so if you have somebody like KP who commands a lot of attention, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of guys like Zach and Dyson.
Yeah. I think this team has good depth. The thing I do worry about is the center position for them. Mm-hmm. Because if Porzingis will probably play 60-ish games if he has a normal year, and maybe more, maybe less. But then it's Onyeka Okongwu. And then who would be my question is going to be a backup center for them?
I think a lot of people do forget about N'Faly Dante, who they signed underratedly from the Rockets. Mm-hmm. I think one of the big things that the Hawks right now really like about what they have at center position is all three of those guys are so different in so many different ways in terms of how they play. Onyeka is a little bit of a hybrid. Dante is sort of your traditional big, and then obviously Porzingis. And I think the fact that they have those guys who do such different things, it's certainly going to make training camp interesting competition-wise. I don't even think the Hawks know who's going to be their starter yet, but I personally would probably start Onyeka just because of his durability last season and him really and truly earning that starter position. I think you have a bit more flexibility with KP coming off the bench, but also I think a lot of people forget that KP could play the 4. And so I do think, they have a little bit more versatility at the big. I think the Hawks aren't particularly worried about how many minutes each guy is going to play, and it's going to kind of balance out just because both of those players in KP and Onyeka can kind of switch a little bit at the 4 and the 5. And so when you throw Dante in there a little bit, I think that takes maybe some of the worry about, well, is it going to be sustainable for KP to play X amount of minutes, or can Onyeka play? I mean, Onyeka played dang near 40 minutes in that last playing game, or near 50 minutes in that last playing game, or whatever it was, against the Heat. And he looked really good. He was putting in a lot of work. And obviously that's not something you want your center to be doing all season long, but he's put a lot of effort into making his body stronger so that he can have a lasting impact on the team. And so I do think that that's kind of what the center. I think a lot of people also forget that Mo Gay can play minutes at the 5 in a pinch. It's not always perfect, right, but it's he's there and he does add a lot of depth. He can also play the 4. Also, Asa Newell. I don't think the expectation is that Asa Newell is going to be playing a ton of minutes. With the main roster, I think he's going to spend, quite a bit of time in College Park, but he's a very smart player. And from everything that I've heard in the Hawks organization this summer, it's like he picks up things fairly quickly. And so I think, he will come along at a solid pace that if you need him to step up and put him on the big stage, he can handle it.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest swing factor is for this team? If they're going to achieve the things that people that are the highest on the Hawks think they can achieve, let's say outside of injuries, because I think injuries
I was going to say
injuries are the biggest swing factor for every team. So I won't let you use that one, but what is a swing factor for them, like on the court, that you think could get them to being like a conference finalist again?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that they can, even if they're not per se winning the non-Trae Young minutes, if they can at least sustain production enough in a way that there isn't as steep of drop-off as they had in seasons past, I think that's sort of the swing thing. That's what a lot of people worry about, is just what does the offense look like when Trae goes to the bench? And if you have guys like Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard, sustaining that production, or even keeping it as close to what Trae Young can, potentially do this upcoming season, I think that's a huge part of what will make this Hawks team successful. Just because if you don't have to over rely on the defense like the Hawks had to do last year when Trae went to the bench, then I think they're a team that can be, very scary, very, very scary.
Yeah, I agree. I love this team. But that said, what's the most realistic outcome? Let's fast forward. Season's over.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing exit interviews. What's the most likely outcome for this Hawks team?
I have them getting to, at best, the conference finals. Of course, it's hard for me to see this team making it all the way to the finals. I do think that they could make a conference finals run, especially if things all line up the way that you want. If obviously injuries happen during the season, but if they're at a point where it's not something that truly impacts the season in a negative way, like for example, Jalen Johnson not going down in January with the season-ending shoulder surgery. If the injuries are as minimal as possible, or as what's the word I'm looking for? Light, not as serious. I'm struggling with words, but I think if that's the case, then they can get as far as the conference finals, especially because the East is so wide open right now. Yep. Realistically, I have them finishing the regular season around 5th, just because it's just so hard for me to predict what Detroit is going to look like. And I think that's just kind of, to me, their most comparable competition. If in terms of just teams that line up, I think those two teams are going to be battling for 4th and 5th.
Agreed.
And then I think Milwaukee's 6th. I don't know. I'm really intrigued by the Giannis Turner pairing. I'm really intrigued to see how that sort of works out. But yeah, so exit interviews, I think we're probably talking to them maybe after, the semis, the Eastern Conference semis.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Yeah, which is a step forward. I think like that to me is super realistic. I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Go read Lauren at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Anything else you want to promote before we go, Lauren?
Support local journalism.
Yes. I love that. Lauren, we'll have you on again as the season progresses. We're big Hawks fans here.
Love it.
At the Athletic NBA Daily, so we'll definitely be hitting you up. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.